check those clocks. Digital, analog, sundial, or if you are me, you're bare-wristed, and you need to ask your best pal in the whole wide world, Chris, what time is it?
It is a time to think.
It's a time to think. We have been mushy-brained all summer, not taking really any time to think, although you have been pining away, Chris, waiting here.
I have been. I'm not Chris Pine, but I have been pining about doing a new podcast
You've been showing up every Monday, just sitting in the building alone.
Yeah, knocking on doors, knocking on windows. Where are you, Josh?
It's like that meme of the guy sitting, you like the 4-frame meme of the guy sitting on park benches by himself.
Ooh.
That's you waiting for me.
It's sad. It's sad. But you know what? We can be happy today because we are recording a new episode of A Time to Think, which is a thoughtful, careful discussion about issues facing the church and the world.
Oh, so close, Chris.
You've heard you usually say this, Josh.
You just
I know.
Tune me out every time, don't you? You're so
Thoughtful,
close.
careful discussion about
issues related to the culture and the church. But I am encouraged that you've just heard me babble.
I said the world is culture. Come on, Josh.
You've heard me babble for years, and you remembered 85% of it. If that was our sermon retention rate, then wow.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
So we'll take it for our little podcast
That'd be
slogan.
Wonderful.
We're sitting here, Chris, and I'm encouraged to see you brought your notes.
Yeah.
You always come fully prepared.
Well prepared. Lots of notes.
We had one of the listeners from the Wausau Church. He's a pretty perceptive guy. He goes, "It sounds like you come with a bulleted list of notes and Chris just shows up." And I was like, that sounds exactly
That's exactly right. Yep.
I say that because neither of us has notes. We're both hands in the pocket right now. And this discussion that we're going to start off having about evolution is something that if we had talked about it 3 months ago, I think I would have brought 5 pages of notes. Because there was a moment of late winter, early spring where I was reading through a book on theistic evolution. And it was like a lot of what I was thinking about. We're preparing for Genesis 1 and 2. And I would have probably had 4.5 pages back and forth of a Google Doc with notes. And there's a part of me, Chris, that thinks I was better prepared to have this conversation then. But I think what's been beneficial for me is I've just kind of let it lie a little bit. It's not been the intense focus of my mind. And I think now is a good time. As in Wausau, we're going to be re-engaging with Genesis coming up in a few weeks after Labor Day.
And Stephen's point, we've been engaged the whole time, Josh.
Yeah, you wanted to do 14 weeks on the flood. And so a good time to just kind of get we've had the theistic evolution conversation with different views of creation, but we've teased a couple times. We want to talk a little bit about the scientific and the kind of scientific cultural consensus about evolution. And so as I've let some of those things, I don't know, I've thought about other things this summer. I think we're in a good position to just say, what are 2 or 3 things Christians need to know about the current scientific consensus, and 2 or 3 things that are helpful for Christians to know to challenge the current scientific consensus.
Sounds reasonable.
If for nothing else, then we're not caught off guard thinking that we're the Neanderthals who don't believe in the widely accepted, definitely true, only smart people believe theory of evolution.
Yeah. In case anybody wasn't picking up, that was very tongue-in-cheek.
I was smiling when I said it. So let's just riff, because when we're teaching through Genesis 1 and 2, there's enough things about it that are, even just, is Genesis 1 and 2 talking about the same thing? Even just literarily, you have to deal with some different idiosyncrasies. But then you get a scientific consensus in the modern day that's coming to bear on your interpretation. And it's tempting as a modern Christian to think, this has to alter my interpretation. And so I think what we want to do here in the scientific portion is just say, okay, how do Christians think about evolution in a way that it is a theory rather than a fact, and not one that we need to alter our interpretations of Genesis 1 to cow 2. Any thoughts on that, Chris, as far as like what maybe are misconceptions about evolution or parts of it that seem to be widely held as fact that are actually debatable?
Yeah, so I was actually watching the other day, Piers Morgan had Stephen Meyer on. Stephen Meyer, he's a Christian guy. He's a well-accomplished scientist and physicist and so forth. And Pierce was on, and he was effectively communicating to him, saying like, Stephen, can you give me an understanding about, your perspective on evolution and on God? You're a believer, right? So Pierce asked that of Stephen Meyer, and Stephen said, yeah, of course. And in this process of discussing, Stephen Meyer brought up the fact that what has been widely held as the consensus view regarding evolution has actually been questioned for a number of years now by those in the scientific community, even to the point where it was sometime in the past 10 to 15 years, I think it's probably the past 10 years, where there was the, I forget the exact name, it is basically like one of the most prestigious societies for biologists in the world.
Okay.
And at this conference, one of the leading scientists got up and basically said, the theory of evolution, as we have understood it for decades now, is not tenable. Mm-hmm. It's just not a tenable solution anymore. We can't go off of this because the things that we would have expected to find, we've not found. The things that we should have seen, if this is true, we've not discovered these things. And so there has to be another explanation for this. So Stephen Meyer brings this up to Piers Morgan, and I think what's helpful is
Is that the same situation? Because I haven't listened to as much video, but Stephen Meyer wrote and edited that big, thick volume on theistic evolution. And one of the things he said is there was a very renowned scientist, atheist, not a believer, who said, at the very least, we need to reopen the potential for intelligent design.
Yes, absolutely.
Is it the same guy?
Yeah, I'm assuming it is.
Because it's just hey, we have actually done science poorly over the last number of decades, centuries, because we have limited the field of possible results.
Correct.
And we need to now not do that anymore. And the way to make the possible results unlimited is to actually include the potential that intelligent design is the right way of thinking.
Yeah. And so the reason I bring that up is not because as Christian people, we have to, acquiesce to scientific consensus. I don't think that's what we're advocating here. What I am saying, though, is that the general conversations that somebody might have with a non-Christian person or even a professing Christian who says that evolution is obviously the way things happen, is that a lot of the assumptions that are baked into these conversations are built on faulty data or misconceptions about the way the scientific community itself even views this matter. And so you might have people walking around the street with this idea, well, this is settled science, this is obviously how it occurred, and anybody with a brain would believe this. And if you really actually take a look at what the scientific community communicates, is to say, well, that's not necessarily the case. So that's where we start to make this differentiation between what we would see between unbelievers who would talk about this capital, like a lowercase versus capital ID, right? Intelligent design, lowercase I, lowercase d, basically meaning, could it be that a deity, some type of higher life form, designed life as it is, right? So, an unbeliever would say, well, that's a possibility within the scientific community. Somebody might say that. But as Christian people, what we're interested in is not necessarily establishing that, well, is intelligent design a possibility? But it's to say, what does the Bible say? And then how do we actually understand how the scientific communities function in relationship to these issues of origins? And I think just initially to make this type of clear statement for a Christian person to understand, this is not a slam dunk case for scientists who are coming from an atheistic worldview, because even atheistic scientists are now acknowledging they may not have the answers. And so going from atheistic to agnostic is a very large jump for some of these people, because they've built their scientific career on assumptions that they're now recognizing were not really helpful.
Yeah, and to kind of build off the idea that a consensus is not actually a consensus anymore, one of the things James Anderson has, philosopher we mentioned quite a bit in our apologetic series, one of the things James Anderson has pointed out is that when you have a scientific community consensus about something like evolution, really what you have is a broader discipline, science, that's investing authority into a field specialization like evolution. Because many scientific fields are so specialized that you can't be experts in multiple fields. Like you got to be expert here. And I experienced that as I read through this theistic evolution book. It's like got 50 or 60 authors, and this one's an expert in geological dating, and this one's an expert in protein. I don't even know if protein genomes is a thing. I'm not an expert in that. But like every chapter was by this different expert going down into the very fine nitty gritty of this specialized field, such that when you're looking at the broader discipline of science, each scientist is going to spend their career specializing in something narrow. And then when we think there's a community consensus, it's really a community of various narrow specializations looking at the narrow specialization of evolutionary science saying, yeah, they're probably right. So it's not this gigantic, we've all discovered this ourselves.
Yes.
It's a broader discipline saying we trust the people that are narrower in the discipline. And there may be some logic to that, right? To not distrusting your colleagues, but at the very least, it's saying this is not just a guaranteed wide swath movement, right?
Yep.
So that's one step, is we want to be able to just and let's talk about some of the consensuses that consensi. Wow, that's great. I think one of the things that's been challenged recently is the idea of biogenesis.
Yep.
And so biogenesis, life begets life, which means all life comes from previous life. And the pretty easy question to ask is, where did the first life come from, right? And so there was, that's called abiogenesis. Is the term of negation. And there hasn't been an answer formed for how we got from no life to an entire world built on life begets life. What's interesting, Chris, is we don't actually have to go any further in explaining than that.
Right.
It's very simple. If the claim is biogenesis, in evolutionary biology, all life is begotten from earlier life, but we have no rationale for how we got from no life to life, then we have at the foundation of the theory a giant hole.
Yeah. And this is even where I think Richard Dawkins himself says there's a problem, right? He one of the leading atheists in terms of popularized atheism would say, yeah, I don't know how we can really reconcile this. And I think at the very least what that should help us understand as we have conversations with non-Christian people is to say, don't be so quick, non-Christian, don't be so quick to level accusations of circularity toward Christian people, right? Because it's like, oh, well, you just believe there's a God, therefore,
Why can you trust the Bible? Because God wrote it. Circular argument, Christian.
Right. And so when it comes to evolution, it's to say, well, please explain it to me. And then the answer might be, well, because there couldn't have been any other way that it happened. Well, why is that? Well, because life evolved. Well, how did it evolve? Well, because there is no other option, right? And so it's just kind of a shut down argument that's made. And so the problem of abiogenesis is a significant one. It's a very significant one because, and here's something that I just, over the years I've thought about, and I've had conversations where I've, I think been helpful in pointing this out to people. It's not been regular, but I think it's good to illustrate here, is to say, like, so what is life exactly? Like, how do we define life? Because what is it about this idea of carbon-based life springing up in terms of the perfect conditions? Like, what necessitates that?
Yeah.
Right? So what necessitates that carbon-based organisms should function in the way that carbon-based organisms do within this earth? What is preventing, quote, life from developing abiogenetically from, helium? Why don't we have like helium creatures, just going all over the place?
Fun is begotten from helium.
Right. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you can breathe in helium and have a good time.
Right now, then we could change our audio quality.
Yeah, a couple octaves up. We could do it. But, so why is it? What is necessitated out of this? Why is it that perfect conditions exist? And this is one of the arguments for intelligent design and ultimately for biblical creationism, to say certain conditions exist here uniquely that are not found anywhere else. And people can point telescopes up at the sky and say, well, there's the potential because we saw light and infrared signatures that might suggest this, and this. But you take a look around and you think, this is unique. This earth that we live on is very unique. And there is no indication that anything is like this. And people talk about Goldilocks zones and all those types of things. But why is it a Goldilocks zone? Why is it that life is so sensitive on this earth that if one little bit of change were to occur, it would be obliterated? And yet we say that somehow it evolved to adapt over billions of years.
Yeah.
And so if we're like evolving to adapt over billions of years, you think, well, that's more than enough time to accommodate slight changes here and there. But that's not what's being claimed. It's saying like, okay, well, yeah, one little smidgen here, one little axis difference on the Earth's rotational scale, one axis difference that we might get a degree or two would throw everything off. It's like, well, but isn't life able to adapt?
Oh, sure.
So we've got supposedly billions of years of abiogenetic quote, life, effectively, chemical soup that's functioning. It's like, so what necessitated that it showed up the way that it did when it did? And if it's so able to adapt over such a long period of time, which is what evolution claims, is that it requires millions of years for it to actually come into being the way that it is. Well, millions of years is a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so if you have slight changes, you would think, well, then there's slight adaptations that need to occur at the same time. But that's not what we find. What we find is life is incredibly precariously positioned on this razor's edge that says a little change here or there, it can't exist.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, adaptability seems to be pretty relative at this point.
Yeah. So that brings up a couple things. One, hello Moto, in case you heard that coming from Chris's phone. Number two is when you're looking at some of the basic questions that maybe have theoretically been explained by scientific processes, we want to reclaim those to be philosophical or religious questions.
Yeah.
So what this idea that how we need an explanation of how we got from abiogenesis to biogenesis. Mm-hmm. We're not going to get empirical data on that, right? And so if science is empirically based process where we're observing data, forming hypotheses, extrapolating conclusions, it just is impossible to do that for the origin moment.
Right, exactly.
And we see that through all different philosophies. And so we're on a level playing field here. Mm-hmm. So when Hebrews says, by faith we believe that what is visible came from that which is invisible, right, so does the atheist. Mm-hmm. Like the question of origin, the question of destiny, these are religious, philosophical questions. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And another thing that comes to mind, Chris, that is widely held as consensus is the idea of the fossil record. And I've struggled with that for a while. It's like, how do you disagree with someone that says, well, the fossil record shows, right? There's evidence here. I mean, I think the easy answer to that is the fossil record, if we go based on the fossil record's own standards, mm-hmm. right? So let's just say we defer to the standards of the fossil record geological discovery. There are at least a handful of massive moments where we do not see a slow progression of life forms. We see seemingly a new what's called explosion of life forms. The
Cambrian explosion, primary. Right? Yeah.
So now the Cambrian explosion is the biggest one, but there are a bunch of other little explosions. I mean, maybe at least a dozen or so. I could go back to that big fat book that I keep talking about and just show, they said Cambrian, they said one other major one, but then they noted a bunch of different other moments where it's inexplicable that there were life forms that just came to be.
Completely differentiated, right.
And so even by the fossil record's own standards, we would say there's proof there that long-term incremental adaptation of forms is not what we find.
Correct.
Right? Any thoughts on how a Christian should think about the fossil record, respond to those types of claims?
Yeah, I mean, that was Darwin's own hang-up. Honestly, that was one of the things that he basically predicted, because paleontology, like we might be prone to think that paleontology has been a scientific discipline for centuries, but it hasn't, right? And so, when we think about things like dinosaurs were not regarded as, quote, dinosaurs until the mid-1800s. And modern paleontology begins at that point because people are discovering these like skeletons, these fossilized remains, like, oh, we don't see these things anymore. Well, this is weird. And so Darwin has a similar type of a conclusion as he's looking at his theory and he's thinking, okay, as paleontology continues to, take flight here and become a real discipline, he said it will be certainly displayed that in the fossil record, all of these incremental changes within a species, from species to species, will be observed in the fossil record. Well, we've been at this for 150 years. It's been a long time since we've been doing this thing. And a lot of people have made a lot of money digging things up around the world. And whether it's been intentionally paleontologists digging stuff up or excavators who are taking big old, caterpillars out and digging big holes in the ground, because now we have machinery. They didn't have machinery when Darwin is hanging around. We have machinery. We're digging giant holes in the earth now, not by hand, giant holes in the earth through, heavy equipment. And guess what we found? Nothing. We found nothing. We found dogs that are dogs, cats that are cats. And that's what we found. And so I think when it comes to the fossil record, there is this, without kind of, trying to get too involved with this to say that there's relativity when it comes to the fossil record and dating, because it's all on the basis of what your assumptions are. If you assume that it took X number of years for deposition of certain layers of soil to get laid down, it's like, well, yeah, your record's going to bear that out, because you're going to say, oh, if it takes 1,000,000 years, well, then 1 inch equals 1,000,000 years. That's an assumption you've made. But let's say there are other explanations for why this certain layer is this thickness, and it actually took this time. This has happened with ice core samples, where in the Arctic there have been World War II aircraft that have been found buried in ice that look like it's tens of thousands of years old. So, well, no, this crashed in 1944.
Sure.
But if you were to drop in from outer space and say, let's do an ice core sample of this planet and determine when this plane flew, say, oh, this flew 26,000 years ago. No, it didn't. It flew 70 years ago. So a lot of the relativity of dating is important for us to understand here as Christian people, so that we don't get this sense that somehow the fossil record is working against a Christian perspective, because in fact it does work for it. Because the number one liability for Darwin, at least in my understanding, was that he said, this will be borne out. And if it's not borne out, this is not true. Well, it hasn't borne out, and it's pretty obvious at this point that these incremental changes have not existed in the fossil record. So now the liability is on the evolutionists.
I've had conversations with folks who have said, well, what about this one life form that seems that it looks like it's an intermediate form? And I think my quick response has just been, why don't we have 1,000,000 of those
Correct.
examples? So maybe there is, the Christian tends to hear, oh my gosh, what do I do with that life form? Like that seems like a pretty damning thing. I don't know what to do with it. Instead of thinking, if this is as unquestionable as it's been portrayed to be, why is it not so pervasive it's undeniable?
Right.
So these are the types of questions we can just ask in order to, I think, get the onus off of our shoulders, or that feel like we have to then bow to a scientific interpretation. One thing that's coming to mind as we're talking, Chris, is just the nature of I'm going to put forth a proposition.
Okay.
Confidently.
Another proposition.
And then I want you to tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Yeah.
It's more food for thought. Evolution is only tenable in an a la carte thought culture.
Yeah.
Because what you find in Christian circles is we're trying to mesh evolution with theological interpretation, right? Let's see if we can take these two things we want to hold a la carte and put them together. But that also happens in the contemporary culture, because we don't treat elderly women or small children based on an evolutionary ideology, right? We
better not.
we have this kind of like scientific explanation of the origin of the world that doesn't actually bleed into our moral compasses most often. And so we have this a la carte vision of thought life where we can have this scientific explanation and this ethical explanation. And that's really a hallmark of modern culture, is we don't think consistently. We don't have systems of thought. If anything, systems are the problem, Chris. We don't want creeds and confessions that establish systems. Christianity is dogmatic. It has a system that wants to come to bear on me, but I don't want that. I want to be able to pick from various systems. So if I like a little bit of the Buddhist system, and if I like a little bit of the Christian system, I like a little bit of the humanist system, that's good for me. I can kind of pick and choose.
It's mosaic this.
But I think that's really how evolution can continue to survive, even if it's shown to not be as a dominant consensus as possible. Now, the flip side of that, like I said, for Christians, is I don't think we should try to have an a la carte theology of creation.
Correct.
If evolution is not a slam dunk consensus, we should not feel the compulsion to add it on somewhere. And I say that because oftentimes let's go back to the biogenesis piece. Okay. All life comes from life, but we just don't know what started this whole thing. Well, God could be the answer. And he just got it started. And my question theologically would be, why would you want to settle for that?
Correct.
And we've talked about this, I think, on other podcasts, where the more and more you talk about theistic evolution, the more and more it sounds like deism.
Right.
It sounds like the divine clockmaker that just sets things in motion and lets it run away.
And there's nothing particularly biblical about it. There might be something philosophical that Plato could have agreed with, but not biblical.
Is deism a philosophically tenable argument? Sure. Does it mesh with the God of Genesis 1 and 2, let alone the rest of the Bible, that is intimately involved, dwelling in the garden, is saying he's upholding the hearts of kings with his right hand, he's setting kings in places. Like, all of those things necessitate a very actively involved God, but a God of theistic evolution is intermittently involved at best. And so it's kind of this, it's a little bit better than deism, but it's not quite as sweet and rich and good as biblical Orthodox Christianity.
Yeah.
And so if evolution is not a consensus, we shouldn't try to add that to our cart and then have it distort some other things.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing I would keep in mind for Christians. A couple other things that come to mind, and that just being prepared to handle this conversation is, the one you'll have is, 99% DNA similarity between monkeys and humans? Is that the claim? Or is it 95?
I don't think it's quite that much.
It's high.
But yeah.
Quick response is, if there's a designer, he might have a good design that worked.
There's also jellyfish compatibility as well. So, I mean,
Tell me
honestly,
more.
yeah, I mean, so if you look at DNA similarities, a lot of different life forms that would seem to be not a lot alike share significant amounts
Sometimes
of code.
after a weekend of eating whatever I want, I look more like a jellyfish. That one hit home.
Yeah.
I like when I see you laugh.
That's good. Thank you, Josh. Thank you. But yeah.
Okay, so two quick arguments, because we could have a longer discussion on this,
Yeah.
but really this is just how do we approach this conversation. So you're saying we're not too similar to a jellyfish, and there's DNA sharing components. Mm-hmm. I'm saying it's at least as plausible an argument to say that an intelligent designer uses similar designs in multiple ways, just like Ford uses similar models and adapts different characteristics onto the similar chassis and those types of things.
Yeah.
Anything else you would add? Because I think I want to move on to an AI conversation. That's what I'm more interested about at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, I do want to be clear as far as the, Ken Ham says something helpful. Angiogenesis says something helpful. A lot of different things. But basically, that when you look at this idea of, shared genetic code, you think, is that evidence of a common designer or common origin when it comes to just like genetic, backdrop and everything? It's like, well, it would seem to me that to live in a particular world, it would make sense for things to share a lot in common, right? So it's like, okay, if you're going to design life to exist in a world, and sometimes like as human beings, we have to be careful as Christian human beings, especially, to say like, okay, I am not a glorified monkey, okay? Like I'm not, but I am still a creature. And what differentiates me as a creature is not necessarily the fact that I have, 23 legs and no other creature has 23 legs. What differentiates me is the fact that I bear the image of God. And that doesn't necessarily reflect in physicality, all right? That's not because, the standards are clear. Like the incorporeality is the nature of God, right? By nature, God is not defined by a body.
Just like we wouldn't say that a biped is more valuable than a monoped. Like that. So just used to like.
Right.
I'm thinking about a monkey using two legs to walk around. Yeah. They're not more valuable than a dog.
Right.
Because of the physical limbs and
champion
structures.
The dog, 3 legs. But so Jesus, the eternal Son of God, who is without body prior to the incarnation, becomes incarnate. And so he takes on human flesh. But the dignity that belongs to human flesh exists because God has designed, right? And created us to bear his image. And then God has redeemed in the coming of Christ to take on human flesh, so that those who would find their righteousness in him would find a captain of their salvation who has gone before and suffered temptation, without sin. I mean, all these beautiful things that attach to the incarnation. But to say, as creatures, right? Jesus takes on a human form, which is a creature form.
Yeah.
Right. And so we don't want to think of ourselves as though somehow as human beings, our physicality is so much higher necessarily than the physicality of other beings that are in this world, because to say you're still a creature. But what distinguishes you is you are created in the image of God.
Yeah,
you
so
are
the
created for
argument is
fellowship
not, well,
with
let
God.
me tell you about the 4% that's different of my DNA code. That's really what makes me a human.
Yeah. It is the human soul. And that's not a genetic component, right?
Yeah.
You are designed to function in this world, all right, as a being, as a created being. And so Jesus shows just the blessed dignity of human nature as he takes it on in the incarnation to say that this matters, right? Like that even fallen human beings matter to the point where the eternal Son takes on human flesh, sinless human flesh, to redeem human beings. So say we are beings. We are created beings,
right.
though. And so, if we're going to look at this differentiation between genetic, there have been some sick studies that have been done where people have tried to breed monkeys and humans together. And there've been weird studies. I know you give me a weird look at my face right now.
If we were on video, my face would say gross.
Yeah, it's weird, but there have been attempts. There was one, I believe it was a Russian scientist in the early 1900s who got this real big kick, this idea of okay, well, yes, we have evolved because, early 20th century Russian thought was deeply invested with communistic Marxist thought, which is atheistic in nature. So this guy's like, all right, let's do this. Let's try this. And it, of course, never worked. Right. But what do you get if you have wolves and dogs? Let's say our dogs, and we've got 2 dogs, your dog, my dog, and they, a wolf, try to breed a wolf with a dog. What do you get? Well, you get a creature, right? It's doable. Okay. It's possible, but you don't get human monkey hybrids. You can't get those. They don't exist. So whatever shared genetic code exists, Christian, you don't need to worry that somehow it's I'm so close to it. It's yeah, you're also so close to a hippo. You're also so close to a jellyfish. You're close to a penguin. You share genetic code, sure, because you share a world that God made for you to live in.
Oh, I think I said we're going to move on, but another question popped up, and I'm running the show here, so I get to do what I want.
Even though you have no notes?
What would you say? That's why we're just waiting.
Yeah, good.
Man.
That's a good time.
Otherwise, my great idea, I'd be I can't do it. My hands are shaking. I gotta. So, oftentimes the idea of the Copernican revolution gets brought up, and this major moment in which there was a disagreement within Christendom about a scientific problem. Right? Did the Earth revolve around the sun, or the sun revolve around the earth? And the standard claim goes that the church was wrong then, and therefore the church can be wrong now. If I'm accurately representing kind of just the popular level of that claim, how does the Christian think about the idea of the Copernican revolution in relation to someone saying, see, that could happen again with evolution?
Well, the Bible doesn't claim to have a geocentric world. The Bible makes no claim to that, right? The Bible's claim to geocentricity is only in terms of the activity of God among beings, right? Among human beings, this is a world that he has created, a planet that exists in which he has established life that lives in a redemptive drama throughout the course of this span of history, from creation to, final redemption, new heavens and a new earth. That's what the Bible makes plain about what this world is about. It doesn't say oh, well, you know what? The sun revolves around the earth, and that's it. It doesn't make that kind of a claim. So we need to be careful when we say things oh, the church was wrong. It's well, let's differentiate here. The Roman Catholic Church, the institution Roman Catholic Church, has been wrong about a lot of things.
At least 2 things.
Yeah, they've been wrong about a lot of things. And so we look at this and say, how do we know as Christian people, as we look at somebody, the Roman Catholic institution that is commonly represented as this is the picture of Christendom, is to say, why can we sit here and lob grenades, as it were, at this institution that claims to have been established by Jesus himself? Say, well, because when you're out of step with your founding documents, you can't be a reliable representation of what you pretend to represent. And so whether it's the Roman Catholic Church, Bill's megachurch down the street, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. If you deviate from the sufficiency, supremacy, inerrancy, authority of Scripture, I don't care what you have to say. And when it comes to that, the Bible makes clear something about creation. God created in 6 days. He created man in his own image after his likeness. He created man to be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. He created man to glorify and enjoy him forever. It doesn't say that he created the earth to be revolved, to have the sun revolve around it. It doesn't say that. So therefore, we don't need to hang up over that issue.
It's interesting that you landed with kind of that traditional fourfold quality of Scripture: the truthfulness, the sufficiency, the clarity, and because kind of why I begged the Copernican revolution question is that one way to look at liberalism, and when we say liberalism, we're talking theological liberalism, not political liberalism.
Which, strangely enough, can exist in what pretend to be conservative evangelical churches.
Yeah, and so you have theological liberalism. One kind of concise way to say it is a movement to try to make orthodoxy more palatable to a contemporary culture.
Right.
If you look at the ways that it's been done with the search for the historical Jesus in the 1800s, if you look at all your Schleiermachers and Ritschls and all those good guys, Harnachts and all these great guys that
or your Bill
denied
Hybels,
orthodoxy,
right? Or your Joel Osteens.
What they do is try to say, how do we take Revelation and make it more palatable?
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to know that that's the move, right? So what's the standard line? If you don't know history, you're destined to repeat it.
Sure.
So if you don't know that the standard move over the last 250 years has been to say, let's change the revelation given to us in order that it matches our current consensus, our contemporary thought better, and that led Schleiermacher to deny doctrine totally. For Schleiermacher, religion was just experience. It was not experience informed by doctrine. It was just experience. And that came from a move of trying to say Revelation actually bows to contemporary thought. So we need to make sure we know that that's the history of liberal theology. And liberal theology, it's not just like this is what nerds like Chris and I like to talk to.
Right.
It actually, liberal theology eventually denies all of the core components of Christianity that get us saved.
Right.
There's another line that's like, liberal theology leads to a God without wrath, saving people without sin by Christ without a cross to a kingdom that has no judgment. And it's like all of those are actually the core foundations of God saving us from our sin, Christ atoning for those sins, Christ literally physically being resurrected from the dead on our behalf, there being an actual heaven that we're going to with him. So the train of thought here is that liberal theology ultimately leads to denial of all of the core literally life-giving components of following Christ.
Right.
And therefore, if the first move of liberal theology is how do we make this historic revelation kowtow to contemporary thought, when we see that regarding the evolutionary conversation, we should be very wary.
Yeah.
And that's really what one of the histories of what's called Old Princeton. So current Princeton Theological Seminary is very liberal theologically, denies authority of Scripture.
Right.
I don't know what their official policy on the atonement is, but they deny the authority of Scripture. Well, there was Old Princeton, which was one of the bellwether orthodoxy in late 1800s, early 1900s, and one of the biggest issues that turned Old Princeton into New Princeton was the issue of Darwinianism. Yeah. And I think it was H.H. Hodge that said Darwinism is akin to atheism. Like that was what he saw. Yeah. And as more and more professors at Old Princeton caved to evolutionary thought, the entire seminary caved and gave up on biblical authority. Yeah. A line that comes to mind from an old mentor of mine is, the slippery slope is a bad argument, but it's a great observation. So when we're saying something like, hey, if you do this first step, you might do these next three steps, someone might say the slippery slope argument doesn't actually deal with the argument at hand here. That's right. When we're talking about complementarianism, when we're talking about creationism, this just saying, hey, don't go too far is a bad argument. But it's a great historical observation to say every time or almost every time someone's taken this step, they've fallen off this cliff. And so we're going to be really careful not to take that step. Chris, if we had commercials, we would break for a commercial for Chris's Auto Shop, available 24/7 in Plover, Wisconsin. Just call Chris. He loves cars. It's free. He'll be your friend.
Free. Exactly.
And now that Chris's Auto Shop has been sufficiently pubbed, we're back for the second part of our podcast today. Actually...
Second part of the podcast. Josh, we're cooking here, aren't we?
We got time.
Yeah.
You actually segued us nicely because a lot of the things you talked about toward the back end of that, before that glorious ad, had to do with anthropological things. What makes us a divine image bearer, a creature that, as Cornelius Van Til said, like we are, we image God in every way that a creature can. We never transcend our creatureliness. We never stop being a creature, but the difference between me and my dog, is that my dog does not image God in every way that a creature can, but I do. And so we start to move that these creational ideas of image bearing, they actually affect our anthropological ideas today. And I think that one of the chief anthropological issues is the artificial intelligence discussion. And sometimes artificial intelligence will be discussed in terms of the next step of human evolution. Like, look where we've gotten. Sometimes it is combined with ideas like transhumanism, that we can transcend certain creaturely limitations, right? Why be relegated, Chris, to being a creature if you can transcend those creatureliness things? So AI is really part of a modern technological movement that screams to us that we can transcend our limitations. So that needs to be informed by anthropological issues, like what it means to be an image bearer, what it means to be an embodied soul, those types of things. The reason I kind of bring that broader issue up is because usually when I'm talking to someone about AI and how they use ChatGPT or what it can be used for, or when it's ethical or unethical, it just has to do with look what it can do. Or maybe you're more like me and you're like, I don't want to touch it because it's going to, like, I don't want to know what it can do. Or you're
I don't really care.
You're thinking in terms of apocalypse, like, where is this going to go? And some of the best insight I've read on this is we are far too concerned with what AI can or cannot do, what we should or should not do, rather than being concerned with what we are turning into. And that really goes back to the whole digital liturgy series we did a few years ago, where Samuel James's book was more concerned with the types of people we were becoming than just the do's or don'ts. That's how we often talk about media. Like, what show can you not watch? What show can you watch? How much football can you watch on Sundays if you're a Sabbatarian?
Unlimited.
Can you drink this? Can you eat that? Can you do this? And we tend to, if we're honest, those types of restrictions are easier for us because either we can follow them or we can shrug them off, just depending on our personality. So we live in the do's or don'ts category rather than the what does the accumulation of me doing this thing make me into, right? So an easy example that's non-AI related was like, what does it make me into as a person if every time I have a curiosity, I Google it immediately? Well, I get more information quicker, but I don't retain anything because I don't have to. Because I can always just Google it again. There's no encouragement in my mind to actually make sure I remember who that actor was from the movie that we're talking about. I'm less curious. I don't practice curiosity. I'm less good at solving puzzles because that's kind of oftentimes what some of those things are. You're trying to solve this puzzle. When did I watch that movie? And so even in just this innocuous example of a Google search, you actually change into something when you do that. And that's where my mind goes with AI is it's not just are professors going to be able to keep students from writing all their papers on ChatGPT. It's, for instance, I'm with friends on a fishing trip and a book gets mentioned and someone asks ChatGPT for a summary of the book. And my thought was, you get a dude in front of you, you could ask for the summary of the book. Or let's say you go on vacation and you want, hey, my wife and I like variety of ethnic cuisine and we like hole-in-the-wall restaurants. What can we find? So, okay, that you could probably actually get a good answer from AI on that. Or you could talk to someone on this, like you walk down the street and say, hey, what's the best restaurant in town? You live here. And so there are certain ways that we default to artificial intelligence to do things that we used to have a friend do for us. That would be a big concern of mine is like, I'd rather Chris summarize the book and what the meaningful components were for me.
You sure about that?
So that I can know why it's of value rather than just have a bare piece of information. Any thoughts on AI and kind of how using that modern technology might change us?
There's a I mean, maybe I'm becoming a Luddite over this issue. Maybe 30 years from now, I'll be able to, see, grandchildren, prove the old codger wrong. That's there's potential, but I doubt it. I doubt it, and I think because technology on its own merits, so technology on its own needs to be evaluated on its own merits, right? So what is the merit of this particular technology? A washing machine is an advancement in technology. And I would say a washing machine is a helpful piece of technology.
That's why I just have washboard abs, because then you don't need Everyone knows that's not true.
Oh, so yeah, that's something. But as far as looking technology in the eye and saying, all right, what is it that you can do for me without me being fundamentally altered by you? Because as human beings, we have a high, like, the integrity of the human being is significant, right? So as Christian people, we are concerned to be faithful image bearers, right? We want to be faithful image bearers. And so as we ask questions about technology, we ask, is this a helpful component? So is it helpful for us to have a car? Is it helpful for us to have a washing machine? And I would say these types of technology can be used responsibly without fundamentally changing who we are, right? It might change how we do things. So we have more time if we have a washing machine. We have more time if we drive a vehicle. But the problem with AI, and I would say the problem that we've seen, like the technology creep, and when I say technology, we're using like capital T technology over the past 15 years, having, both of us having gone through the smartphone revolution, being cognizant of what it's like to have a smartphone versus what it's like to just call somebody up, right? Just call somebody up on the phone, is that it is fundamentally altering our social fabric as a culture and our sociability as individuals. And that's problematic for me. Now, AI as another like layer of this adds certain components that I don't think we've come to terms with yet, because we haven't used this long enough to see the changes, the alterations to our human experience through it. But I would say, even looking at the smartphone revolution, my observation at this point, I just noticed this the other day, and I'm not trying to, I guess, kind of pat myself on the back with this, because I don't typically travel with a phone. I don't do that.
Is this about our fantasy football draft?
No, it's not.
Because you got ridiculed for not bringing your phone.
I did, but I had a good draft, didn't I? So as we look at how this functions, and I was noticing, Rosalie and I went to get, there was like a fish and chips truck in town in Plover a handful of weeks back. And I was
British guy?
No, from Alaska.
Oh.
Alaska. They had some fresh fish in that they were frying up with chips and everything. And so we're like, yeah, let's give this a shot.
Yeah.
This is a unique thing. We go to this food truck. We order, and I look around and I see a whole bunch of people, grown adults, okay? And by grown adults, I'm talking like 30 plus, all the way up to people in their 60s, who are waiting for their food, standing with their palms held, their thumb, to the left, their fingers over to the right, staring at a device that's roughly maybe, 3/4 of an inch thick and, 6 by whatever. And they're all standing there. And then the other hand, they're using one finger and they're just stroking this device over and over again. And I'm like, this is weird, right? This is strange.
When you say it like that.
Yeah, because that's true. That's reality.
But it's the type of thing you can only see when someone else does it. When
Yes.
when you do it, it's totally justified, right? And
Right.
oh my goodness, the amount of times that we have a marriage argument over which use of the phone is justified.
Sure.
It's like, why are you on your phone right now? It's like, well, you were just on your phone 5 minutes ago.
Right.
Yeah, but I was responding to so-and-so. It's okay, well, I'm doing this right now. And both of us are trying to justify the fact that when we're looking at that 6-inch screen, it's actually lighting up with important things for us that justify us pausing the things around us.
Right.
But when the other person does it and you don't see that screen, number one, there's kind of an interesting piece of, sometimes it's helpful to just alert the person around you, hey, by the way, I really got to respond to this message.
Right,
It's
exactly.
an urgent thing. And then I actually know what you're doing. But there's this weird thing with, that's starts with a laptop, but is increasingly so with a smartphone, where I don't know what you're doing on your screen, so I don't actually know if it's important or not.
Right. Am I interrupting you, or
you're just gone?
Yeah, exactly.
So I do think that moment you had is easier to recognize in other people than it is in ourselves. We should just say, if I recognize it in other people, that probably means that's also what I look like.
Am I doing it? But I think with the AI piece, Josh, the thing that's important for us to do is to evaluate, like, is this going to fundamentally alter how we live? Okay. And by live, I don't mean like driving a car, washing clothes and washing machine, but like as human beings, the human experience, are we going to be so altered by this that our fundamental capacities are going to actually, like, I would say my concern at this point, at this stage of the game with AI is that I fear that we are going to start regressing in human capacity, because we are
Capacity
going
to do what?
I think my primary concern is capacity to think, our capacity to actually have
we
original
got job
thoughts.
Security, baby.
Yeah, there you go.
This podcast is just going to fill the whole void.
Yeah, exactly. But original thought, original thought matters. Not not as though we just create things out of the blue, but just to think. I mean, God created human beings to use our minds to glorify Him and honor Him. And I think what AI is at this point is, if I can be so bold, I'm not going to equate it with a sinful practice at this point, but it's almost like we are trying to image God in the most fallen way possible, which is, let's create something in our image after our likeness to relate to us, so we don't have to relate to somebody above us. So let's create artificial intelligence, and let's try to make it an image bearer of humanity. Let's create this thing that isn't us, but that can be like us, that we can relate to. And what's happening right now, people who have AI girlfriends, right? And it's like, hey man, that's a whole lot more enjoyable than having so-and-so who's volatile, so-and-so who might break up with you at the drop of a hat. Like, if you just have somebody who's programmed to relate to you the way you want her to, and I use her in quotation marks, it's like, wow, that seems to be a lot more enjoyable than having to hunt somebody down and like, see, if she like me, I like her. Exactly. And so what I think we're seeing here is the fallen human approach toward creating not convenience, but creating something that can effectively, I think, worship us, because it's going to reflect what we want it to be, and it's going to reflect fallen beings. And I think one of the reasons why we're so afraid probably about what AI could do, and it's the whole Terminator kind of a thing, is like, oh man, well, if AI gets a hold of the fact that humanity is dangerous to itself, won't it wipe us out? It's like, well, are we dangerous as creatures? Are we dangerous creatures? Are we doing things that are unsafe, that is actually, and just forget the idea of like dangerous to the environment. I just think from a Christian perspective, dangerous to ourselves. And if you were to step in and objectively observe how humanity treats itself, treats one another, is that dangerous? And I would say, yeah, it's a problem. It's a pretty big problem.
You use the word helpful. People probably say, yeah, AI is really helpful. That's exactly why I use it. I mean, it allows me to write emails faster. It allows me to get those book summaries immediately. I don't have to read reviews online. It allows me to do, I mean, I'm so ignorant that I got basically those two things because I've heard other people do it, but I haven't actually, I've never chat GPT'd before. Right. So I couldn't tell you the myriad things that you can do. Write a resume, any of those things that you can actually do with this. So I think the common thought would probably be, it's actually really helpful. So if you're asking me, we evaluate a technology based on how helpful it is, then I'm going to give it that whole green thumbs up that says, yeah, it's very helpful. And maybe I would just pastorally ask us to not flip the script, maybe adjust the word and say, is it beneficial? Beneficial has more of a moral component than helpful. Yeah. Helpful, we tend to think in technique. We think in terms of efficiency. Beneficial, we start to think a little bit more in terms of morality.
Good.
And that's what Paul says, I think, in 1 Corinthians 8, maybe also in 1 Corinthians 6. All things are lawful, but not all things are beneficial. Right. So is the use of AI lawful? Well, so long as you're not directly cheating on an exam, I think a lot of the, you're not directly using it for pornographic use. I mean, a lot of it is lawful use, right? Is it beneficial? Well, that's going to be a wisdom call that you're going to actually have to ask, just like you might ask, is the amount of football I'm watching this weekend actually beneficial?
Yes, always yes.
I say that as a guy who just went in with, Mama Holland on Sunday ticket this
year
so I could watch my Titans.
Yeah.
But I'm probably going to also have to reevaluate how many Vols games I watch because it's just not beneficial for me to be on my couch all weekend, every weekend. So as Christians, we don't just ask what we can do, we ask what is beneficial. And that's where you get back to the anthropological questions. Is this making me more human in the sense that am I better bearing the image of God? And this can go in any number of ways, but I've used the example before that I found out early in pastoral ministry that I would get stressed on Sunday and then I'd go home and I would want to watch a game and then I'd be short with my children. Because they're young and they get in the way.
Because you'd watch the Titans and they've always lose.
Yeah. So exactly. No, that's part of it. It's like if they were the Chiefs, then I would feel better. So I'm stressed from work. I'm watching something that's depressing me on a medium that's stimulating me, and then my kids are getting in the way. And what's the product? I yell. That wasn't helpful. It wasn't beneficial, right? Was it lawful? Yes. But you have to make these judgment calls and these wisdom calls. Is the thing I'm using actually benefiting me? And so that would be what I would call us to do is say, are these things making us more like more human, that's why I asked your capacity question, more capacity to enjoy the world around us.
Yeah.
I think that's probably what stuck with me from that Samuel James series more than anything, is the idea that if we are flooded with triviality, then even meaningful things are trivial.
Yeah.
So let's say you're having a deep, rich conversation over dinner, and you go for a bathroom break, and instead of going, wow, what a deep, rich conversation, you say, what's on Twitter?
Right.
And you cut the moment. Let's say you experience the glories of the Lord in worship on Sunday, and you're around people who are joyful. Maybe they're even clapping, and it's Wisconsin, and that's amazing, and there's joy, and then you leave, and it's like, okay, what's on my calendar?
Yeah.
There are ways in which lawful things are not beneficial. They don't allow us to extend these joys, to relish in these joys, and then we become joyless. We don't actually linger over pleasures. We don't eat a meal slowly because we're watching TV while we eat, and so it's more animalistic. We're just shoving food in our mouth. We're not saying, I can actually taste the richness of the avocado in this meal. And so these are all examples. Just say, I have found for me, technological advancement leads to a greater hindrance to me just taking pleasure in things, such that if I spend all my time speed reading stuff, because that's what I can do, I can skim articles, I can speed read, it makes it really hard to read a novel. But there's a reason I want to read a novel, because it's pleasurable, right? If I want to watch a football game, but I'm doing it with my phone, I'm not actually enjoying the drama of the game.
Yeah.
If you're not a sports fan, that sounds stupid to you, but there actually is drama of the game. Who gets the ball
it's
first?
Enjoyable.
Who gets down? What are the stories behind the players?
Yep.
But I'm not thinking about that anymore, because I'm just thinking about who's angry on Twitter. And so I would call to mind that idea that we need to think, what is summarizing this book versus asking a friend to summarize it? What is that doing to me? Is that making, like you said, the sociability? Is that building relationships? Because deeply, I want a connectivity with those around me that's solidifying, it's joy producing. Another dynamic I would give people as a framework for thinking about issues surrounding AI, it comes from Andy Crouch's book, The Life We're Looking For. As an aside, Chris, you'll find this funny. The other day I was telling someone something, and I said, well, as Jonathan Edwards said in his book, heaven is a world of love. And I just paused myself and I said, I sound, I think, really pretentious right now. I should just say, one guy said, like the author of Hebrews says, as written somewhere. Aside to the aside, have you read the Wing Feather Saga?
We have it.
Okay.
We've not read more than a few, maybe chapters in the first book.
So there's a portly old character that will always say something like, as Professor Chris Tillyman once said, no way. And so he quotes these fantastical named people and just says common things.
Yeah.
Okay. Aside to the aside, back to the Andy Crouch book. He gives a fourfold paradigm to think about if technology is actually beneficial.
Okay. Lay it on.
He says what we always do intuitively is ask, what will I get to do that I couldn't do? And what will I not have to do that I did have to do? He said every time we're easily evaluating things like a car. What will I get to do? Go farther, faster. What will I not have to do? Walk as much.
Yep.
And we're like, duh, car. He said the two questions we rarely ask that are quite important are, what will I no longer be able to do that I used to be able to do?
Yep.
And what will I now have to
do
that I didn't have to do? So back to the car thing. By the way, pro car, we've got two of them. Humble brag.
How many TVs do you have, Josh?
Just one, because we're Luddites. So pro car over here, and yet you do have to ask the question, if a car allows me to get farther faster, does it enable me, make me incapable of developing rich relationships in my neighborhood? Because it's easy to leave my neighborhood.
Well, you're doing burnouts in front of people's houses and driving their lawns too.
It makes it easier to not have a church in my neighborhood. It makes it easier to work farther from my neighborhood. Does actually the advent of the car make it harder for me to have rich neighborly relationships? I would say, yeah. And what do I now have to do that I no longer? There are times where your weekend is just flooded with things that you used to be able to just say no to, but you can get there reasonably, right? Anyone who travels for work will tell you, I get to travel for work, so I get to do these things, but I also have to do these things, right? And so when we're evaluating AI, it's like, what can I do that I know? I mean, I can get answers faster. I can get information summarized more quickly. I can find bullet. What am I no longer going to be able to do? What if I lose the ability to summarize it myself? This basic thing we learned in grammar school and middle school.
I mean, do you remember like having an orientation library?
Yeah.
In elementary school, where it's like, here's a card catalog. Here's how you look stuff up. Here's how you research things, whatever. And like at the time, you're thinking like, oh, why can't I play Oregon Trail right now? Like, this is just a waste of my time. But the reality is, like, I'm finishing my doctorate right now. I got to research stuff. Mm-hmm. And if I could go back 30 years and tell, little Chris sitting in Roosevelt Elementary, hey, Chris, you're going to need to do something like this one day. It's like, okay, I'm not going to treat this like a waste of time. And so, yeah, I think we do lose the ability to research, to actually like think through things in a way that isn't just relying on somebody else to do it. Because what do you end up then leaving yourself open to? That might be a fifth question, a sub question to add on here. Is like, what do you leave yourself open to? Well, you leave yourself open to people telling you things that you're just going to believe, or AI telling you something to believe that has no basis in reality.
Yeah, because reading and writing is about thinking critically.
Right.
And thinking critically is going to be moving you toward using your heart, mind, soul, and strength, that human muchness all in the same direction to glorify the Lord. If you can't critically think, and maybe anyone over the age of 35 is like, well, I've already developed those skills. But muscles atrophy.
Yep, absolutely.
That's just... muscles atrophy. And so just because you've developed muscles doesn't mean they can't be lost. And so that's, I think, a big concern of mine. And you and I are not, maybe we're not in an AI-driven industry, but there's certain AI pressures on pastors. Like,
strangely. I would say even, it's shocked me, Josh, how many pastors I hear of who are plagiarists, who will plagiarize sermons straight up, rip off a Piper sermon, rip off a MacArthur sermon, and be completely floored that somebody found them out. It's like, well, you're a liar and you're a thief.
Yeah.
But I think that's what AI is now enabling pastors to do, and it's frightening.
Well, there was a discussion on a different podcast talking about the similar issues, and they basically said, okay, well, what's the difference between reading a homily that was written by someone else, which some traditions will do, versus having AI write your transcript and you read it? And actually, one guy said something fascinating. He said, well, you're operating with a faulty assumption of what texts are. Books are. Texts. That was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be to say. You're operating with a faulty understanding of what books are, because in the olden days, if you only had 200 books in your library, you were going to spend massive amount of times with those books to a point that the words you read would become, in some ways, part of who you are. There would have been an inhabitation of that. It's similar to how we, I store up your word in my heart that I may not sin against you. Some of these Psalms-like thoughts that I'm going to meditate on your word and savor them, and they're going to be refreshment to my bones. Right. There's an older way of looking at words that is much more than just information accrual. And so this guy was saying it, like, I think he was in the Anglican tradition. He was saying, if I was to read someone else's sermon that they wrote, I would spend all week poring over those words and prayerfully considering those words, so that when I preached it, there was a way in which those words were becoming my words because I had imbibed them and they had transformed me. Now, would we preach someone else's written sermon? I'm not saying do that, but his point was, we can't bastardize what a written text is. And if we have this older vision of the idea that words were supposed to become a part of us and change us, so there are these certain pressures. And you use a program called Logos, and I kind of want to, but I've still held off. And if Logos is one of our 61 listeners today, then you guys feel free to toss me a free trial for mentioning your name. But I was talking to a Logos representative at a conference, and I said, hey, I like paper stuff. Why should I use your stuff? And he said, you must have a lot of time.
Oh boy.
And he was
That's a schmoozy response.
He was a nice enough guy, but he was like, you must have a lot of time. And I just said, well, I have about as much time as you. And he goes, well, then you should use Logos. And his point was, hey, when I used to prepare sermons, I used to have to, remember those things you used to have to do?
Sure.
I used to have to open the dictionaries. I used to have all these commentaries out. I used to have to do this. But now, at the click of a button, I can get the word. There's something really compelling about being able to, at the click of a button, get the definition. But I think I'm concerned, Chris, in my own heart, that I don't just take the easy route on all things.
Sure.
That when I read a commentary, I'm not just thinking, how do I get this passage right? But I'm thinking, what are my people missing that they might need?
Right.
And what might the Lord have for me to say to them? And those are slow and prayerful processes. They're not efficiency-based processes.
Yeah. This is one of the reasons for me, like, why I typically will not preach the same sermon twice. And one of the reasons why I don't use notes when I preach, really. Like I've got a standard format
or
that
when
I go.
You do podcasts.
Yeah, exactly.
What about marital conflicts? Do you bring notes?
No, definitely don't. I don't know that bring notes anywhere really. But when it comes to preaching for me, I've got passages that are all supportive of what I'm trying to communicate, and thesis statements that I have generated internally to think this is what captures this. But the question I'm asking, consistently every single week when I prepare a sermon is, and when I pray about it, is like, what do these people need to hear from this passage of Scripture this week? As an expositor, my job is to be faithful to what the text says, to open it up. But as an expositor, my responsibility then is to help people engage with the Word, so that what is happening in Scripture in front of them becomes something that the Lord uses as an instrument to change their hearts.
Yeah.
And so the reason I don't preach the same sermon twice or over and over, why I honestly I kind of have an issue with people of canned sermons, is because you're not asking the primary question that a preacher should ask, right? Like teaching, you might teach the same
lecture notes,
content. Yeah. Exactly, same lecture notes, because you're not asking the question, what do these people need to hear? But for the preacher, the primary question is, what am I supposed to herald to these people, right? I might know that somebody is struggling with infertility right now. So this text, I just preached yesterday on the promise to Abram that he would have a son. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, okay, so-and-so is struggling with infertility. So if I preach this, I want somebody to know that there is hope to be found in a God who does ridiculously, seemingly impossible things. Now, it doesn't mean that the infertile person is going to have a kid because I preached on Abram having a son.
Yeah.
But it does mean that they need to encounter the God who does these remarkable things in history to say, and even when Abram had his son, according to the flesh, right? He has two sons. He has Ishmael and he has Isaac that are juxtaposed. That his great reward was not Isaac. His great reward was the city that has foundations. Its builder is God. And that's what Hebrews says. That's really what Abram was looking forward to. It's like, okay, so you're struggling in infertility. God can do remarkably impossible things in the eyes of men. But what's even greater than that is that the God that Abram believed on, and it was counted him as righteousness, is a God who was his actual reward, not just having a kid. So this is where you connect these things as a preacher, and where AI has no idea. They don't know the people that you're talking to. And when I say lay, it's a loose term. It is a program. It's not a being in any way, shape, or form.
And you can, to be fair, you could, to my knowledge, say, how would I apply this passage to someone with infertility and get answers? But what I'm saying, I think what we're saying is, when you short circuit that process, you're starting to do something different. Like if you were to do that, say, we're going to use AI to find points of application, I would just say, please linger over that for 45 minutes. Like, see, does that actually match the passage? Is this what the Lord would want?
Right.
And that, maybe there's not many preachers listening, but the process is that when we really care about people, we linger over how we would care about them.
Right.
If you're a father or a mother and there's something hard, your kid gets bullied at school, like your heart is attached to that, and you're thinking about how to encourage them and what they need and what wisdom you can offer, and those things are not things that you get from Ask Jeeves.
Yeah. What should I tell my child about being bullied? You don't ask that question.
You do that by sitting with them. You do that by ministering to them. And so these are the types of things that we just want to make sure we're not becoming short-circuit creatures that are always taking the shortest route and therefore missing what it means to be humans. We did not take the shortest route on this podcast, but
that's
you
on
all
purpose.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. We know, because no one's complaining right now that we can hear of.
If you are complaining, just be kind and don't let us know.
Yeah. So we appreciate your patience over the summer as we've had varied schedules to hopefully be more consistent in the fall. We've got some college students returning to class in Stevens Point. So
exciting.
If you want something to be praying about as a church, pray for college students to know and love Jesus more, whether that's for the first time or at increasing depth. Until the next time, this has been this time of A Time to Think.